Back to the vBrownbag Tech Talks here at VMworld EMEA 2015. I'm Alastair Cooke, and this session is on running AutoLab on Ravello. It'll be your lab in the cloud. I'm an independent trainer, consultant, writer, analyst, all kinds of different things, and as a member of the vBrownbag crew, I bring you lots of great content for free. I'm also an author on Pluralsight, where you can find a course on the new features of Horizon View version 6 that has my name on it. And I also write for TechTarget and the virtualization practice, another couple of great places to get some content for free. This thing called the AutoLab that I created a few years ago and have been enhancing and extending over the years with some help from my friends is a nested vSphere training lab with a whole heap of automation to build it. I talked a little earlier about the new features and the AutoLab version 2.6, and you can look that video up on YouTube as well. The AutoLab itself lives at labguides.com, and even if you're deploying onto Ravello, you should have a look on that site and get hold of the deployment guide. Even if you're not ready to deploy AutoLab, it's a good place to go to find out how the process works for deploying AutoLab. So definitely you'll need to head across to labguides.com and have a read of the deployment guide. And you'll also want to learn a little about Ravello. Ravello is a really interesting company. They have their own hypervisor that runs on top of both Google and AWS. So they were developers of the KVM hypervisor, moved across to Ravello, and they built another hypervisor that sits on top of both Google Compute and also on top of AWS. Their hypervisor recently, this year, acquired support for running nested ESXi, which they call Inception. This is 3 hypervisors layered one on top of the other and each able to run virtual machines. And it's this ability to run ESXi on top of either AWS or Google Compute that we use to run AutoLab on top of the Ravello cloud. And Ravello really is a cloud automation product that works across multiple clouds by creating a virtual cloud across them. It's really cool and interesting stuff. So we should think about why running AutoLab on Ravello is such a good idea, and it has been a really good idea for a lot of people. One of the key things is that you don't have to buy a large physical hardware box with lots of RAM and lots of CPU and lots of SSD in order to be able to run AutoLab. If you use Ravello, you're using AWS and Google's resources. So you have an unlimited amount of resource available. One of the things you'll find is that the virtual machines in AutoLab on Ravello are configured to use more resources than if you were using a local ESXi or workstation machine, because Google and AWS both have vastly more resources available than you and I can afford to buy. I haven't made any architectural changes to AutoLab to account for that, but that is a piece of work that Ravello and I have been talking about doing. Is how would I have built AutoLab if I had an infinite amount of CPU and memory as we do in the cloud, and that'll come along later. Of course, you still have to pay for those resources, or at least most people are paying for resources when they use Ravello. So you do pay for the CPU and memory that's in use while the VMs are running, and you do pay for the storage that you're using while the VMs are running or not. So it's very important that when you've finished using your AutoLab on Ravello, you power off the virtual machines. And of course, there's a shutdown script inside the AutoLab that makes that easy. In addition, when you're finished with the lab that you've built, you need to delete it so you don't get the monthly cost of storing it on the platform, which does add up after a little while. So what's the process to get AutoLab on Ravello? It starts with signing up for a Ravello account. Ravello have a free 30-day eval mode, which you won't actually make last for 30 days because it's limited to the number of CPU core hours that you can run within that evaluation. Then you need to deploy AutoLab into your Ravello account. Now Ravello have a wonderful thing called a repo or repository that contains pre-built, what they call blueprints, collections of virtual machines all configured up and ready to use. And AutoLab is in the repo, and you just deploy into your Ravello account the pre-configured blueprint that we have in the repo. However, we can't distribute things like Windows ISOs or the ESXi or vCenter install ISOs because the licensing agreements from Microsoft and VMware don't allow this. So you will have to go through a process of uploading your ISOs before you can build your Ravello platform. Now happily you only have to do this once to get the ISOs into your Ravello account. You can reuse those ISOs multiple times after the upload. Then of course you've got to deploy and build your AutoLab on Ravello. and that takes some time. It takes, in my experience, a little bit longer than on my high power development machine where I do all of my AutoLab development, but it's still easily achieved in somewhere around 4 hours. And of course, being AutoLab, most of that time the automation is running. You just have to wait for the automation to complete one phase before you start the next. Once you've got a built AutoLab environment on Ravello, what you can do is actually shut it down and make it a blueprint yourself so you can create more AutoLabs directly from it. Or alternatively, you can just use that copy of AutoLab. You can use it as you would normally on a local machine, learn about it, play with it, and once you're finished, remember to shut it down and delete it, or just rebuild. So the sign-up process for the trial with Ravello is very simple. You go to ravellosystems.com, and on the top right there's a sign-up page, and it comes to this and says, hey, there's a free trial. Limited to 30 days, limited to, from memory, 250 CPU run hours. And that's probably the thing you'll run out of first. I know I did when I used the eval. Beyond that time, if you're not a vExpert, then you will need to pay for your usage. But if you are a vExpert, then you can get 1,000 CPU hours a month for free, which is an absolutely wonderful amount of lab environment. It's enough time on Ravello to run the AutoLab for about 8 or 10 evenings of long study time every month. So it's a fair amount of resource. So you sign up with Ravello, get your account, then you head across to the repo, and this is a link just at the top of the Ravello portal page where it says here's a whole heap of pre-created blueprints of these collections of virtual machines, a little bit like a VMworld app. And you'll see at the top of the list is AutoLab with, as of today when I screen grab this, about 330 different Ravello users have imported the AutoLab blueprint into their account. So pretty pleased with that. It's the most copied blueprint on the Ravello repo, and you just click the Add to Library button, and that will take you back into your Ravello environment, and you'll be able to then upload your ISOs and then deploy. So the upload process is painful. Okay? Won't sugarcoat it, it is a pain. There is an agent that gets downloaded to your computer, whether it's a Mac or Windows machine, that runs a service, and you go through the upload process. We just upload 3 ISOs, so the Windows Server ISO, the ESXi installer, and the vSphere installer. ESXi and vSphere most extensively tested with 6.0, and I actually assume that the ISOs you upload are 6.0. If you can actually upload 5.5, but all of the way that AutoLab works is it thinks that you've uploaded 6, and that can be a bit of a problem. It is at this stage unavoidable going through that upload process because Ravello don't have a service provider license agreement with either VMware or Microsoft that would allow them to bill you for the use of your own or the use of their own ISOs. Once the ISO upload completes, and it is very dependent on the speed of your connectivity through to the Ravello cloud, once that does complete, then you can deploy the AutoLab on Ravello. And Ravello have this nice UI here where you get this canvas that lists all of your virtual machines. And I haven't actually shown the edit side on the right hand side. There are a few steps documented in the deployment guide about connecting the right ISOs to the NAS virtual machine and then powering virtual machines on in the correct order and those kinds of things. It's not completely seamless, but it's not terribly difficult. It is just a process to follow. You power on the collections of virtual machines and wait for the normal build processes. Of course, you build the domain controller after the NAS machine has finished coming up. Then you can pixie boot the 3 ESXi servers and then finish by installing the vCenter server. You'll find in the deployment guide it's really crucial that you run the validate script on the domain controller virtual machine. Now this is a standard thing that we do every time we build AutoLab, but it's very critical on Ravello because we haven't uploaded things like the ISO, the installer for PowerCLI, and the vCenter installer will not complete successfully without PowerCLI installed. Unfortunately, there isn't an unauthenticated download location for PowerCLI. So the validate script on the domain controller will actually go to the right website and ask you to put in your My VMware credentials and pull down the correct version of PowerCLI. It's not the latest version, and that traps some people. They think they're going to short circuit the process by manually downloading the latest version. I need an older version of PowerCLI on Windows Server 2008 with ESXi and vCenter 6. You actually have to use one of the 5.5 built to power CLI. But the process is there. You download, you run the validate script on the domain controller, and it will open the correct page. Once you've built your AutoLab environment, once you have your cluster built, it is just a normal cluster. I walked through the process of using RDP to connect to the vCenter and run the vSphere client and the web client from on that vCenter virtual machine. And RDPing in there is much more effective than using the remote console that's built into Ravello. The remote console is as slow as a very old vSphere remote console, and of course you're very remote for it. So I always RDP onto my domain controller or my virtual center machine to do that work. And then it's absolutely use standard AutoLab once it's built, so you can play and test and break and have no fear that as you try things you're going to create a huge disaster, because you can always rebuild just like any AutoLab environment. Once you're done, remember that you are being charged for consumption, so you'll be charged for CPU and memory for every hour that your AutoLab is running, and a fully built AutoLab on Ravello is going to have somewhere around 20 virtual CPUs. So every hour of runtime on this, you'll run through 20 CPU hours, and so the 1,000 CPU hours that you get from Ravello if you're a vExpert burns up pretty fast. On the other hand, if you have to pay for it, it's only about $2.50 to $3 an hour to run the entire AutoLab, and so it's much cheaper if you're only studying for one exam and you're not going to use the lab long term. It's much cheaper to use Ravello to run that AutoLab. Do remember to use the Shutdown script, which is the standard part of AutoLab on the vCenter server, and use that to shut down all the virtual machines when you've finished working, rather than having to watch them. For storage capacity, you're also paying by the day. So every day that you store a copy of the AutoLab, you can be charged for the capacity, the storage capacity to store it. Again, it's not a huge amount. My storage bills end up being $1 or $2 a day. But if I had 5 or 10 different AutoLabs built, that would be 5 or 10 times, so that should be $1 or $2 a month, not a day. If I deployed 5 or 10 different AutoLabs, and that's one of the things that's really nice about Ravello, you have an infinite amount of resource available, so you can deploy multiple AutoLab instances. The more of them you run, the more storage capacity you're using, so the more you're paying. So just be mindful as you're deploying them out. AutoLab on Ravello is actually a really cool way of getting a test environment. Do read the deployment guide that is on labguides.com. It's at the 2.6 release, fully covers the process for deploying on Ravello. In addition, in the AutoLab YouTube channel, there is a video that goes through the process, and that makes things a little more clear even than the deployment guide, so it's worth watching that video as well. Ravello Systems is a really innovative and very awesome piece of technology. Even if you're not using it for AutoLab, Ravello is a really useful way of doing some test and evaluation and work. So I'm Alastair Cooke. You can find me at DemitasNZ online, and you can find my blog at demitas.nz, or you can always find me through the vBrownbags as well. Do spend some time having a play with AutoLab, and good luck with the certification and training that you may achieve through it. And when Ahmad is bringing me up, we'll close it out. It's been a fabulous time here at